Welcome to Life Stories, where real-life moments inspire and touch our hearts. Today's story is about a kind woman named Rachel, who, in the midst of her own struggles, offers a simple act of kindness to an old man in need. Little did she know, this small gesture would set in motion a series of events that would change her life forever. Join us as we dive into this beautiful story of generosity, gratitude, and the unexpected rewards of compassion. Subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. Rachel was a woman who had seen the highs and lows of life. In her late 30s, she had already endured the heartache of a painful divorce, a separation from someone she once believed would be her forever. It was the kind of situation that leaves you hollow, the kind that shatters the expectations and dreams you had for your future. Without children to anchor her, she was left to rebuild everything from the ground up. All the comfort, all the security she once had, was gone. She moved to Brooklyn, a neighborhood that was both familiar and foreign to her. She had lived in bustling cities before, but New York was different. It had a certain energy to it, alive, chaotic, yet strangely isolating. Perhaps it was the sheer size of it that made her feel small, invisible. She found an apartment close to her work, a small but cozy space, perfect for a fresh start. With no family nearby and no close friends to lean on, Rachel quickly adapted to a routine, diving headfirst into her new job at a fancy restaurant. The work wasn't glamorous, but it gave her something to focus on. As a dishwasher, she found herself cleaning plates after a busy service, scraping off leftovers and washing them clean. It was hard, physically demanding work, but it was honest. The restaurant was well known, and at the end of each day, there was always an abundance of leftover food, fresh, uneaten, sometimes even extravagant. The restaurant's owner, seeing how Rachel struggled, allowed the staff to take home some of the leftovers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to feed her for the week, saving her the hassle of cooking and stretching her meager budget just a little bit further. One evening, Rachel finished her shift later than usual, her hands raw from the hours spent scrubbing dishes. It was 10 p.m., and she was exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open as she packed up her share of leftover food into containers. She had grown accustomed to this routine, making sure she took just enough to last her until the next week. This night, however, there was something different in the air. Maybe it was the weight of her fatigue, or perhaps it was the silence of the neighborhood. As she walked home from the restaurant, just a 10-minute stroll from the place she called home, she spotted him, sitting near the entrance of her apartment building. An old man with a weathered face, his clothes tattered and worn, caught her attention. He looked frail, his body hunched over as though it could collapse at any moment. It wasn't the time of night when she would usually see anyone begging for food. Rachel's first instinct was to walk past him, to ignore him, like many others did, but something about him stopped her. His eyes, hollow and tired, seemed to hold a certain vulnerability that stirred something deep within her. As Rachel got closer, she felt an overwhelming sense of empathy. She knew what it was like to feel lost, abandoned, and forgotten. She had lived it for the past year. The pain of her divorce still lingered, the sting of rejection and the isolation she had felt from those around her. She couldn't bear the thought of this old man, left alone in the cold night, without any care or support. It was then that she made the decision to offer him what little she had. Without saying a word, she went upstairs to her apartment, grabbed a large portion of the leftover food she had packed, and placed it into a bowl. She added a bottle of water for good measure. It wasn't much, but it was all she could give. When she returned downstairs and approached the old man, she knelt beside him, offering him the food with a gentle smile. "Hello, sir. You must be hungry," Rachel said softly, her voice a mixture of warmth and concern. The old man looked up at her with surprise, his eyes widening for a moment. A weak smile crossed his lips as he accepted the bowl of food, his hands trembling as he took it. "Thank you so much," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was famished. I hadn't eaten in days. Many people walked by, but you're the only one who noticed me." He paused for a moment, his eyes glistening with gratitude. You must be an angel. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat as she watched him eat. She had never thought of herself as someone worthy of such praise. But the gratitude in his eyes filled her with something she hadn't felt in a long time, joy. She wasn't expecting anything in return. This was simply the right thing to do. And yet, it felt as though she was receiving a gift far greater than anything material. The warmth in her heart lingered long after she had left the old man to enjoy the food. As she made her way back inside, she heard his voice, faint but sincere, calling after her, thank you again." His words echoed in her mind. And for the first time in months, Rachel smiled a smile that was full and true. It wasn't the kind of smile born out of politeness or obligation, it was genuine. She had done something good for someone else. And in doing so, she had rekindled a spark within herself. The next day, as Rachel left for work, she half expected to see the old man outside her building again. But there was no sign of him. Maybe he had gone back to a shelter. Or perhaps he had simply moved on. Either way, Rachel didn't give it much thought. She had other things to focus on. Other worries to contend with. But deep down, a part of her hoped that the old man had found a place to rest. A place where he would be cared for. Just as she had tried to care for him the night before. Life, it seemed, had a way of shifting from one moment to the next. And just as Rachel had been reminded of her own struggles, the old man's presence reminded her of the importance of kindness. It wasn't about grand gestures or grand expectations, it was the simple things. The small acts of love and empathy that made a difference in the world. And for that, Rachel would always be grateful. A week passed since Rachel had shared her leftover food with the old man. And life in Brooklyn continued at its usual pace. She woke up early each day, her body aching from long shifts at the restaurant. But she pushed through. Every day was a battle. Not against anyone or anything external, but against the lingering sadness that seemed to cling to her like a shadow. Yet, the memory of the old man, sitting outside her apartment with gratitude in his eyes, continued to comfort her. On the morning of the 7th day, Rachel was still in bed, her body yearning for rest after another grueling shift. The faint sound of a knock at her door stirred her from her sleep. Confused and groggy, she glanced at the clock. It was just past 7 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? No one knew her well enough to be visiting her at such a time. "Hold on, I'm coming," Rachel called out groggily, unsure of who could be at the door. She dragged herself out of bed. Still disoriented, she stumbled to the door, expecting to find either a delivery person or perhaps one of her neighbors. But when she opened the door, she was stunned. There was no one there. She scanned the corridor, half expecting to see someone rushing away. But there was no one in sight. She stepped outside, her mind racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe it was just a prank, she thought, though the timing felt odd. Then, as she was about to close the door and return to her bed, something caught her eye, a small box, sitting innocently on the doorstep. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She bent down to pick it up. Her curiosity piqued. She had no idea who could have left it there. Her mind raced with questions. Was it a mistake? A forgotten package? Or was it something else entirely? She took the box inside and sat down at her kitchen table, unwrapping it carefully. As the paper fell away, Rachel gasped. Inside the box, there were 2 bundles of $100 bills, neatly wrapped in rubber bands. Her hands trembled as she reached for the money. She had never seen this much cash before. Not all at once. What was this? Was this some kind of mistake? As she fumbled through the contents of the box, her eyes landed on a small note hidden beneath the money. She unfolded it, expecting to find some kind of explanation, some hint as to who had sent this unexpected gift. But the note was short, simple, and cryptic. It read, "This is my little way of showing appreciation. Thank you for your kindness." Rachel stared at the note, her mind racing. Who could have sent this? She thought back to the people she had been kind to in her life, trying to connect the dots. There was no one who could afford to give her such a gift. It didn't make sense. Was it the old man? The idea seemed far-fetched. Almost laughable. He was homeless. After all, how could he possibly send her this much money? The thought lingered in her mind throughout the day. But she pushed it aside. Unable to make sense of the mystery, she wrapped the money in a black nylon bag, locking it away in one of her kitchen cupboards. She couldn't bring herself to spend it. Not yet. The gift felt too surreal. Too strange to be real. For the next 2 weeks, Rachel did her best to ignore the mysterious package. Every time she opened her kitchen cupboard, her eyes would land on the black nylon bag. But she resisted the temptation to even look at it again. She kept it hidden, locking away her doubts and curiosity along with the cash. But then, one afternoon, as she was washing dishes in the back of the restaurant, Rachel's boss came up to her. "Someone's here to see you," he said, his tone casual but curious. Rachel frowned, confused. Who could possibly be asking for her? She barely knew anyone in the city. She had kept to herself. Keeping her head down, focusing on her work, she left the kitchen and walked out of the restaurant. Puzzled. Outside, 2 sleek black cars were parked in front of the restaurant, one with tinted windows and one with regular transparent windows. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a regular visitor. What was going on? As she approached the cars, a man stepped out of the first one. He was older, dressed in a navy blue suit, his face clean-shaven and composed. There was something commanding about him, a quiet confidence that immediately caught Rachel's attention. He walked toward her, a smile playing on his lips. "Hello, Rachel," he said warmly, his voice smooth. "Did you like my gift?" Rachel blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" she asked, her brow furrowing. The man chuckled lightly, as though surprised she didn't recognize him. "Apologies for not introducing myself sooner. I'm William Scott, CEO of Scott Enterprises." Rachel froze. William Scott? The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, but are you sure you have the right person?" she asked. Still baffled. "I don't think I know you." William Scott's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Oh, I know you, Rachel. You're the one who helped me that night. You were kind when no one else would be. I had to show my appreciation." Rachel's heart raced. "Wait, are you the old man I gave food to?" "Yes," William replied with a smile, his eyes gleaming with pride. "That was me. I disguised myself to see if people would treat me with kindness when they didn't know who I really was. And you, Rachel, you were the only one who showed me the compassion I needed." Rachel stood there, stunned. The homeless old man she had helped. The one who had thanked her so sincerely, he was William Scott. A wealthy CEO? It didn't make sense. The man who had been sitting outside her building, hungry and cold, was now standing before her in a suit. A man with enough money to change her life. "I know it's a bit hard to believe," William said, as though reading her thoughts. "But sometimes, life surprises us. And kindness always finds a way back to those who give it freely." Rachel could only stand there, in awe of the twist of fate. The old man, once a stranger in need, had now become someone who would forever change her life. As Rachel stood there, stunned by the revelation that the old man she had helped was none other than William Scott, the CEO of Scott Enterprises, a flood of emotions rushed through her. She had never expected this turn of events. The kindness she had shown, given so freely and without expectation, had come back to her in the most unexpected and beautiful way. William had not only gifted her money but had also opened her eyes to the profound truth that kindness is not just a simple act. It is a force that has the power to transform lives. William's presence in her life, a man who had disguised himself to test the goodness of others, had shown her that the greatest rewards in life often come from the most unexpected places. Rachel couldn't find the words to express her gratitude. Instead, she simply hugged him, tears welling up in her eyes. She had helped a stranger, and in return, she had been gifted a future she never thought possible. "Thank you, Mr. Scott," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You've changed my life." William smiled, his eyes softening. "You did that, Rachel. You were kind when no one else was. And that, my dear, is the greatest gift of all. As the days passed, Rachel found herself in a new chapter of her life. With the money from William's gift, she was able to purchase a small house and even treat herself to the luxury of a car. But the greatest lesson she had learned from this experience was that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the bonds we create with others, and the kindness we share along the way. If you loved this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more life-changing tales. Stay tuned for the next chapter of our journey through the most inspiring life stories. See you next time.